Hello and welcome back to the Watchworks. I'm going to be filming this with one hand, so just a quick warning if you don't like really shaky videos, because this is probably going to be kind of shaky. What I have here today is, as you can see, an Acroprint time recorder. I got this from none other than the Jelly Belly Jelly Bean, another confectionery company. The Fairfield plant. They were selling this off at one of their special events, so they were having this garage sale sort of thing, and they had this. I asked them, it was $5, so said screw it, why not? You can see my charging lead here for my phone. I have it plugged in. I got this back in, I think, October or something like that, and I've started to work on it so I can pack it up, so I figured I'd film a video on it. And yes, this will be pretty long and rambly, so click off now if you don't have the time. Starting off with the outer casing here, you can see it looks relatively old. Looks like it could have been from the 70s or 80s, more 70s in my opinion with that dial, maybe even 60s. But I think this is from the 90s, or at least this one was made in the 90s, so I flip it over here. There's your information tag. Yeah, it's model 150 NR4 time recorder, you listed. Very well built machine. This is an older one. I think their newer ones were this back frame here, and I'll flip this back up and show y'all what I mean. This back frame is plastic now instead of metal. This one's nice because it has these threaded screw bosses pressed into the back plate, and this is a relatively decent gauge sheet metal for what it is. It has a punch out for hard wiring. I think that's what it's for, conduit mounting holes, so your employee can't rip this thing off. Well, they wouldn't rip it if it wasn't mounted, steal it. Why anybody would want to steal a time recorder, I have no clue. You can see the top there. For the models that would have been a manual thing. I'm sure anybody watching this video, I'm sure you're old enough to remember these. I've personally never used one. I think these have, for the most part, been replaced by more digital automated systems. But yeah, you'd stick your punch card in there. This piece of cardboard, for example, stick it in there. So you can hear a micro switch, and I'll show that later. But yeah, held shut with a wafer lock for anti-tampering, so you can have someone come in there and change the time so it looks like you weren't late. Although you'll see in a bit, the setting mechanism on this is kind of cumbersome, to say the least, and I'm starting to think that was intentional. I also have my ceiling fan on. I hope that's not making too much noise. I hope I don't have to re-record this. But yeah, there's your front tag, there's the dial, and I'll get this off. I had to pick the lock. It's just a wafer lock. You can jiggle those things open. I don't think you need much more than a wafer lock with these, because someone would see you screwing around with the lock and be like, what are you doing? So I'll get the top off. The front part is plastic. I think I said that before. Interestingly enough, your clock glass or crystal is actual glass. It's held on with these little pins. My camera's going out of focus. Those little, geez, that's even worse. Little push-on pins that are one way. If you try to take them off, you'll probably break the plastic, so I'm not going to bother with that. Here's your schematic for both the 150, P150, 200, and signal control option. This doesn't have the signal control, so I'd ignore that. Yeah, there's the wiring schematic, the terminal block, and all the other bits and bobs, synchronous motor, and the solenoid. There's the back of the lock here. It's a pot metal wafer lock. You can see it's probably zinc of some sort, maybe. And it's just held on with that tab. You could pull that out and it would come out. So not meant for keeping honest people out, I guess you could say. As I know some people in lock sport don't like that saying, but yeah, this is to keep honest people out. Any person that wants to get in here could very easily do so. So move that out of the way, and here's the internals of this. Motor bits off to the side, because that's the main focus of what I was working on, and I'll get into that in a bit. Here's the internals of this. Here's your dial, obviously. And this is where it starts to get interesting. I'm sure you can also see. Very robust. This thing is heavy. There's your ribbon. Here's a quality assurance sticker there. And 91, I don't know, just for some reason that stands out to me as maybe being the date. I'm not sure. Copper conductor only, I guess that's if you're hardwiring it, which, yeah, you could hardwire it because it has the terminal block in there. My camera really does not want to focus. That there and that there are your main power inputs, and you can see a ground wire out back at the back because this has a metal case, so obviously it's grounded. This isn't so old that, you know, it's ungrounded like vintage fans or their old appliances. Time setting mechanism. Actually, first off, I'll talk about the drive. So this also kind of relates to the setting mechanism. So your setting levers are here. And yes, it is a setting lever. You push it down and it advances the hand by 1 minute. This has no second hand. It just clicks over a minute when that minute comes. And you can advance it 2 minutes. Let's see here. Okay, you can only advance it 2 minutes at a time. So yeah, pretty slow time setting. It makes a lot of noise too, so it'll alert people if you somehow got into this without them noticing you're trying to tamper with the thing. You also have to, I think, have the time set at 3 to change the date. So there's a date changing lever there, and I'm not sure if there's another one. Acroprint actually has some videos on their own YouTube channel too of how to change all that. Yeah, there's all that. And this thing is very mechanical, and this, not in just like the sense of gears, but more in the sense of springs and levers. And as you can see, there's a lot of them. There we go, there's more in there. I did find a way that you can kind of set this a bit quicker by bringing that lever down and then, see here, yeah, turning that while the lever's down. Although once again, that makes a hell of a lot of noise and is kind of rough on your fingers, as you can imagine. Like grinding your skin against a gear isn't exactly pleasant. So now I'll get into the drive actually. And I'll get into the time stamping bits, because that's also kind of interesting. So it's driven here. There's where the motor drive would go into, and that's where this would be down in there. And if you'll see that silver bit there, right in the center of the screen, and I'll move it, which is obviously attached to this lever. Sorry, it's out of focus. This bit here spins at, I presume, 1 RPM, and you can see actually has a good amount of wear. I think the low light level's causing the focusing issues. Jeez. Yeah, you can see that pin will ride up against this and push it down, then release it. And that advances the time by a minute. And yes, I counted. There is, this clicks 60 times per revolution. And you heard that click over. I think this actually does record the time on, well, yeah, of course it does, yeah, on the paper, I think. But yeah, you can see the amount of wear on this. The motor spins at 1 RPM, and I'll show the motor here right now. I'll go in depth with this too, because, well, it's needed a lot of work. There's the lead-in wires. These are detachable. This is the coil pack here. It has this little clip on top, so you stuff the wires down into there, and this bites into the wires, bites through the insulation, and the conductor makes contact with those two contacts there, obviously completing the circuit and energizing the coil. And don't mind my fingernails, I have been working on this and it's pretty grimy and greasy, especially this motor. Starting off with the mechanics of the motor. So that's the coil and all that. Those wires stuffed down in there, as I said. I'll move that out of the way. Those are screws for mounting the terminal block. Here's your rotor, and I'm sure as you can notice it stops that way, but it will spin freely that way. This is a one-way or single direction synchronous motor. I can't think of the word. But yeah, here's the top plate. The coil goes into here. The terminal block pokes through there. And this sits on top of there and sandwiches everything in. So yeah, here's your rotor. It's made of a very fluorescent pink plastic. There's a permanent magnet, I think, housed within this kind of steel squirrel cage. Those all held together with this metal clip. Maybe that's stainless. And this is just regular steel, maybe zinc plated, not sure. And with the one-way mechanism here, I'm sure you see that little locking pole there, and the kind of snail-shaped bit on the back. I had to reshape that. It may look a bit scruffy, not to mention the horrible graininess because of the low light. Sorry about that. This is grimy because I need to clean it up. I just got into this motor. So I had to reshape that. There's actually a bit of broken plastic in there floating around because the motor was, whenever I started it up, which is common with these synchronous motors, it'll either spin one way or it'll go the other if it doesn't have a unidirectional, I think that's the word, unidirectional lock. Or no, uni would be both ways, single directional. There's your locking, your latch right there. I think that's nylon. I'm not sure what type of plastic that would be. So yeah, there's that bit and that catches. So I think the snail shape kind of moves that in closer, and obviously that locks. It reverses direction, and obviously this does not latch going the other direction. So I pop that out there. So there's the piece. So there's that. And that's the basic assembly of this. And see, this forms a squirrel cage within the coil. It's kind of similar to a stepper motor. It basically is, excuse me, kind of a stepper motor. Getting into the gearbox here now, and actually I need this for showing the gearbox. So here's the gearbox. It's kind of cheesy. This is steel, which, you know, it's pretty durable. There's markings out on the motor. I'll show this too. There's an M007, maybe that's a part number. 3 watt, 115 volt AC, 60 hertz. CSA approved. That might be a part number. So here's the gearbox. And this is kind of cheesy because it's just aluminum, and I'm sure this is starting to look familiar, and that's because, well, if you've watched any of Greg Owood Productions videos, he did a video series on a Bulova advertising clock, I think he did, and this is the same exact motor. I've torn mine all the way down here. So the main casing of this is aluminum, which is kind of cheesy, but they did stick, they did put bushings, and this front one is copper, I'm pretty sure. And this rear one is brass. You won't be able to see that. Kind of looks like the reflection of the aluminum, but there is a thin color in there. And you can see there is a bit of wear in this. I'll be packing this back up with proper grease, plastic safe. I like cleaning these out, these plastic gearboxes. A lot of these older ones, it tends to be that the grease reacts with the plastic and degrades it, which, you know, it's not good if you want your thing to actually work, which I do. So here's the gearbox. I've said that like 4 times now. It's probably getting old. Here's your output gear. I think this is stamped steel. Does not look like it's centered. I think that actually is stamped steel with a steel shaft. None of this is going to be stainless, I don't think. It's not that fancy. Next gear here, I think this might be stamped in 2 parts. Either that or it is sintered steel. And I was thinking maybe that pinion was a separate part that was pushed in through there. Look at it closer. No, it's a single part. So that would be sintered steel. Sintering is kind of similar to casting. You take a fine powder, you put it in a mold, and then I think it is heated up at high temperatures and maybe high pressures to where basically it bonds the fine powder together into a relatively strong material, common for metal gears and stuff like that of this size and these little gearboxes. This is a nice touch here. Let me get this one out of the way. So sometimes when these gearboxes transition from the steel to plastic gears, they'll just have a metal gear right against a plastic pinion, and that is horrible in my opinion, because metal and plastic, you know what's going to wear out first. Well, the plastic. So what they did here is they have and this is nice because this goes all the way through, the plastic was cast around this, a metal pinion, and that is actually machined. That isn't a sintered part, that is a machined part going into, I think this is nylon. So that's a pretty nice little detail. That does greatly improve the lifespan of this gearbox here as long as it's maintained. These obviously, usually in a commercial application, are considered a consumable, sealed unit, non-serviceable. Here I can service it to all my heart's content. And I mean that as in maintenance. The second gear here, I'm not sure what type of plastic it is. It might have markings on it. Let's see here. No, there's no indicators of the type of plastic. It's a nice kind of minty green though. That is a pretty neat color. And it's kind of what I like. I'm not a big fan of plastic gearboxes, but I will say they do sometimes spice it up with some nice vibrant colors. And here's your last gear here, which this actually, well, technically it'd be the first in the gear train because it rides against the output pinion of the actual motor rotor. There it is. You can see it goes from that fine tooth all the way up to this rather coarse tooth pattern already. So let me put this all back in and kind of set this on top so I can demonstrate this sitting on up top there, so you can kind of see, get an idea of that. So that goes like that, and you can see how that pinion rides up against there. So yeah, very nice. I cleaned this gearbox out, and so all the gears look pretty nice. So yeah, that's about it for the motor. Here's the back of this, the shafts. Okay, actually they are kind of held in place by this. You can see just little dimples on the top, and you can see it's been punched. They don't punch all the way through. That's actually kind of nice, because then if these get a bit of wear, those won't push through the other side. I've seen that happen before. And the top of the central rotor shaft does poke through there. Okay. That's held on pretty firmly, so I wouldn't worry about that poking through without any stopper on the top. But yeah, that's about it for the motor. There's the power cord. Grounded plug, as I said before. Now getting into, I guess, more of the electrics and also the mechanics of this. You have a micro switch here. Actually, well, you can see actually that just is held on by gravity. That's funny. So these two parts are plastic, probably nylon, I'd assume. You can see that metal lever in the back in the center of the screen moving. That's connected to a micro switch. and those wires go up from down there to the terminal block, and when the circuit is completed, power is fed to this rectifier. This block here is a rectifier, which has it's a nice block rectifier, and it's been nicely mounted to this back panel here, so it'll get some heat dissipation. Not like this thing is going to be powered up all the time. And that feeds into a 120 volt solenoid. See, this thing is massive. It looks like a transformer. Oh, okay, well, that didn't work. Let's see here. Okay, you're not going to be able to see the information, but I'm pretty sure it's a 120 volt solenoid. Wouldn't surprise me if it draws a fair amount of power. So when the paper is slid into there, obviously, there's a little tab there that gets pushed back, and that energizes the solenoid. And that solenoid pulls this linkage up, and see that hammer there, I'll move it a bit. That goes up, and just like a typewriter, slams up. I'm not doing it all the way because I don't want to damage the character wheels. But yeah, it slams the character wheels into the ribbon, which, the hammer slams into the paper, which presses up against the ink ribbon, and the ink ribbon is up against the character wheels. That's all I'm going to call them, character wheels. I'm not sure if that's the correct term, but that's all I'm going to say. Fortunately, I don't have a piece of paper on hand, although maybe I can come up with one. No, I don't have a piece of paper, unfortunately. Or actually, here, I don't know if this will work or not. It's very kind of rough and tumble here. This might be too thick. There's some craft paper from packing. So I'll stick this in here, and I'm going to set my phone down quickly. So, sticking it into the slot. Okay. And then I will actuate the solenoid by hand, just by pulling up on it pretty hard. Not sure if that'll work or not. Very faint. Yeah, very faint, but you get the point. So that stamps onto there. The ink ribbons might be kind of dry. And another thing to note here, let me slam this, well, not slam it, push it up again. I'm sure you're noticing it's bringing that wheel around. There's a little click in there, or a ratchet, that will slowly turn this around each time that someone times in or out. So that's your ink ribbon, and you can see the ratchet teeth on there. There's a lot of various ratchets and levers and stuff on this, as I said before. But yeah, I think that's really going to kind of do it. Let's see if there's anything that I kind of glossed over. Here's your date setting stuff. I'm not going to screw with that because there's a certain time it needs to be at, or a certain time the clock needs to be at to be able to set this without screwing something up. The hands, obviously I said before, that's your setting lever. Do not try to set the time by moving that hand. You will frick something up. It's held on by a screw, and obviously it's all ratchet, one-way click stuff. You're not gonna be able to move it. You can see there's nice chunky bearings and stuff in there. Very industrial. Ironically, I think those are like circuit board standoffs. Those might be aluminum. All of this is steel, besides those posts. They might be steel, I'm not sure. Dials held on with these 4 screws. But yeah, I think that's really about it. That's the wire restraint for the motor. That looks like vinyl, and it's already hard. But yeah, that's about gonna do it. This video's gonna equate to about 5 minutes. So with that being said, if you made it to the end, props to you. it's an interesting clock, so thank you for watching, and see you next time. Okay, so I guess I'll consider this a prologue to the previous segment. I know it technically ended the video there, but well, it was a prologue here. I actually got the motor finished up. Oh, you can see it just ticked over there. I got the motor all cleaned up and working here. I lift the top off. So I'll show you all around it while it's working here. See that that brass bit with the set screw that goes around in there and presses and actually actuates this lever here, which is also the time setting lever. I'm not going to actuate it because I have the time set correctly. There's your terminal block in there. It has fish paper over it, so when you're working on it, you can't zap yourself. Although there's all these nice exposed terminals, I wouldn't work on it. Wouldn't work on this once it's plugged in. Although I have it open, it's plugged in. It's relatively safe right now. Let's see if I can get it to tick over here. There we go. There's a view of it ticking over the actual mechanism there. Right in the center of this screen, you'll see this kind of black piece attached to that brass collar. You can see it's kind of shiny. And that is what presses down on that lever. And obviously, as I said, the minute hand advances 1 minute at a time, which is pretty neat. And as I said before, it's very mechanical in a springs and levers sort of sense, not as so many gears. Really, all the reduction is done in here. This is a 1 RPM synchronous motor. You see I wired all back up in there. That's what holds the wires in place, and they screw into terminals 1 and 3. I just ticked over again. So I'll demonstrate the actual clocking in and clocking out of the actual print, I guess. Sorry, or stamp, I guess you'd call it. So there's a piece of index card, I think that's what it's called, cardstock. And we'll stick this in here, and this is your alignment. So you can see, there you go, 12:52, and it indeed is 12:52. It's not September as of filming, it is actually May, I think. Yes, it is May. It is I'm not sure what date it is. Yeah, I don't have the date set correctly because, well, I'm moving. Some moving boxes there, and I'm sure you saw that in the background. That will get its own video at some point. And I'll show, I know this is kind of getting rambly again, but I will show the actual mechanism actuating with the cover off. So I'll stick that in. That's your hammer, as I showed before. Stick this paper in here and try to keep it out of the way. See how quick that is. There you go, this is stamp again. And I'll do it from the side. Take your solenoid plunger with the linkages and all that. And that's the micro switch down in there with some fish paper or plastic around it, insulating the contacts. So let me actuate this again. And you can see it's just very, very quick. I'll get a top view. Yep, and actually the time just time clicked over again. And I'm sure as you can know, oh, and that's actually, what is that doing? That should be, hang on. This should, in theory, okay, yeah, there we go. Yeah, it should be doing that, and you can see how it advances. I know I keep doing this here, but yeah, it keeps advancing. Okay, it's keeping good tension. And yeah, it advances the ribbon around. Multicolor ribbon, obviously. You can see the date is red and the time is kind of a navy blue. Almost shows up as purple on camera. It kind of is a purplish color. But yeah, that's really gonna do it for this video. I can, let's see here. I'll unplug it to do this because I don't want to keep setting that off. The micro switch. There's the action, putting the paper in. But yeah, that's really about it. So the true end to this video, that's it in all its glory. And I found that you can actually set the time without even having to depress that lever. You just roll the wheel around like that. Very stiff. But yeah, you can just do it around like that and it won't damage the mechanism. There's just a click down in there, so it's just like the click on a great wheel of a clock or something. If you wind it up, you know, it clicks around. But yeah, that's gonna be about it. One more note. I mentioned that these things are pretty much obsolete, so I don't feel too bad, like compromising security or anything by saying this. Even I'm pretty sure they say it on their website. These, the model 150, P150, they all use the same key and you can just buy it off Amazon. So if you get one of these things, you don't know how to pick a lock, you can just order a key for one of these things off of Amazon. They're like $6. I'm actually kind of tempted to do that. If there's a standard key, I'm not gonna bother popping that lock apart. But yeah, that being said, after rambling for like, 7 minutes now, this prologue, thanks for watching. If you made it to the very end, I appreciate it. Hope you got some enjoyment out of seeing the inside of this thing. Here's a more front-on view. And with that, that will be it.